In the early 1900s, a man named Elijah Johnson lived in rural Georgia. He was born into slavery but gained freedom after the Civil War. Determined to build a better life for himself and his family, Elijah worked tirelessly to save money. With grit and perseverance, he eventually saved enough to buy 200 acres of fertile land, a dream that seemed impossible for many Black Americans during those times. This land became more than just soil to him. It symbolized hope, hard work, and the promise of a brighter future. Elijah wasn't just any farmer. He had a sharp mind and understood people well. Over time, he noticed how others looked at his land with envy. Some neighbors whispered about taking it away, while local officials hinted at schemes to seize it under false pretenses. Back then, laws often favored white landowners, leaving Black families vulnerable. But Elijah refused to let anyone take what he had earned through blood, sweat, and tears. So he came up with a plan, a clever one that would protect his family's legacy for generations to come. Elijah hired a trusted lawyer who helped him draft an extraordinary deed for the land. It wasn't like ordinary deeds you'd find anywhere else. This one included special rules called covenants. These covenants were designed as traps for anyone who tried to cheat or steal the land in the future. For example, if someone built on the property without permission, they would have to pay huge fines, or worse, lose everything they constructed on it. If anyone attempted to alter the deed fraudulently, the entire ownership could revert back to the Johnson family automatically. Elijah made sure these clauses were written so strongly that even changing laws wouldn't weaken them. To keep this plan safe, Elijah shared its details only with his closest relatives, making them promise to pass the knowledge down through the generations. He told them, "This land is our anchor, protected no matter what happens." And so, the secret stayed alive within the family, passed from parent to child like a sacred torch. For decades, the Johnsons thrived on their land. They grew crops, raised livestock, and built homes where laughter echoed. The community around them changed over time, but the Johnsons remained steadfast. Neighbors sometimes tried to pressure them into selling, offering large sums of money, but the family always declined. They knew the true value of their land went far beyond dollars. It was a piece of history, a testament to their survival and strength. As years turned into decades, the world outside moved faster. Cities expanded, roads stretched further, and developers began eyeing untouched lands like the Johnsons. But Elijah's descendants never forgot his warning. One day, someone might try to take this land. When that happens, trust the deed. It will fight for us when we cannot. Little did they know, Elijah's foresight would prove prophetic. Nearly a century later, his carefully laid trap would spring into action, catching those who underestimated the power of a determined family and the brilliance of a man who thought ahead. By the late 20th century, Elijah Johnson's great-grandson Marcus Johnson was the keeper of the family land. The once vast fields had been reduced slightly over the years due to legal challenges and rising property taxes, but the core of the 200-acre estate remained intact. Marcus wasn't a farmer like his ancestors. He worked as a mechanic in the nearby town and spent most of his time fixing cars rather than tending to crops. Still, the land meant everything to him. It was where he grew up playing under oak trees, listening to stories about Elijah's struggles, and learning the importance of protecting what belonged to their family. Marcus lived a quiet life with his wife, Lisa, and their 2 children. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they were happy. The land provided them with fresh vegetables from a small garden, firewood for winter nights, and space for weekend barbecues with friends. For Marcus, it wasn't just dirt and grass. It was a connection to his past and a gift for his children's future. He often told his kids, "This land is more than ours. It belongs to everyone who came before us." But peace rarely lasts forever. As cities grew and suburbs spread, developers began eyeing rural areas like the one where Marcus lived. One day, a man named Victor Langston showed up at Marcus's door, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying glossy brochures, Langston introduced himself as a representative of a real estate company. He offered Marcus millions of dollars for the land, claiming it would be perfect for a new housing development. Marcus listened politely but shook his head firmly. "This land isn't for sale," he said. "It never will be." Langston didn't give up easily. Over the next few months, he visited repeatedly, increasing his offers each time. He even tried to persuade Lisa, telling her how much easier life could be if they sold the land and moved somewhere nicer. But Marcus stood firm, repeating the lessons his grandfather had taught him. Money comes and goes, but land lasts forever. Despite Marcus's refusals, Langston kept circling like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, urban sprawl continued creeping closer. New roads cut through neighboring properties, and construction crews built shopping centers not far from the Johnson land. The peaceful countryside slowly transformed into something unrecognizable. Marcus tried to ignore the changes, focusing instead on his work and family. Yet deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. One evening, while sitting on his porch watching the sunset, Marcus shared his concerns with Lisa. "What if they don't stop coming?" he asked. "What if they find a way to take it from us?" Lisa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They can't," she said confidently. "Elijah made sure of that, remember? No matter what happens, this land has its own protection." Marcus nodded, drawing comfort from her words. He trusted the wisdom of his ancestors and believed in the strength of Elijah's deed. But he also knew that powerful people often found ways to bend rules in their favor. Little did Marcus know, his fears were about to become reality. And the trap set by Elijah nearly a century ago would soon reveal itself in ways no one could have imagined. Victor Langston was not a man who accepted no for an answer. When Marcus repeatedly turned down his offers, Langston grew frustrated, but not defeated. He had spent years mastering the art of exploiting loopholes, bending laws, and manipulating systems to get what he wanted. To him, the Johnson land wasn't just another piece of property. It was prime real estate, ripe for development. And if Marcus wouldn't sell willingly, Langston decided there were other ways to take it. Langston began digging into county records, searching for anything he could use against Marcus. What he found shocked even him. A clerical error dating back decades had left parts of the Johnson land improperly documented. Though the family had owned the property for generations, this oversight made it appear as though portions of the land were unclaimed or abandoned. Langston saw his opportunity and pounced. Using forged documents and connections with corrupt officials, Langston managed to rezone the land without anyone noticing. Overnight, the quiet countryside where Marcus lived became designated as commercial property. Bulldozers rolled in before Marcus could figure out what was happening. Trees were cut down, fields were flattened, and foundations for new homes began sprouting like weeds. By the time Marcus realized what was going on, it was too late. His land was being transformed into a sprawling housing development right before his eyes. The sight broke Marcus's heart. Acres of lush greenery that had been part of his childhood were now scared by concrete and steel. The oak tree where he used to climb as a boy was gone, replaced by a row of identical houses. Worst of all, no one seemed to care about the history or significance of the land. To the developers, it was just another project, a chance to make money. When Marcus confronted Langston at the construction site, the developer smirked. "You should have taken my offer when you had the chance," Langston said smugly. "Now look around you." Progress waits for no one. Furious but powerless, Marcus stormed off, determined to fight back. But how could he stop something so massive? Developers already had permits, contracts, and plans in motion. Dozens of families were lining up to buy homes in the new neighborhood, lured by promises of luxury living. As weeks turned into months, 156 homes rose from the ground where Elijah's crops once grew. The HOA, Homeowners Association, overseeing the development, named the area Willow Creek Estates, erasing any trace of its original owners. Signs went up advertising spacious layouts, modern amenities, and community pools. It was everything people dreamed of, except for Marcus, who felt like he was trapped in a nightmare. One evening, sitting alone in his workshop, Marcus stared at an old photograph of Elijah standing proudly beside his farmhouse. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered, "I let you down, Grandpa. I couldn't protect it." Just then, Lisa walked in holding a dusty folder she'd found while cleaning out the attic. Inside were papers related to the land, including Elijah's deed. As Marcus flipped through them, his despair turned into determination. There, buried in legal jargon, were the clauses Elijah had written nearly a century ago. Clauses designed specifically for moments like this. For the first time since the nightmare began, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Maybe he hadn't lost yet. Maybe Elijah's plan still had some fight left in it. The final chapter of the legal battle arrived months later, with Judge Harris delivering a landmark verdict that would change Willow Creek Estates forever. After weeks of deliberation and testimonies from historians, legal experts, and residents, the court ruled overwhelmingly in Marcus's favor. The deed crafted by Elijah Johnson was declared not only valid but legally binding, even after nearly a century. All 156 homes built on the land were forfeited, reverting ownership back to the Johnson family. The HOA dissolved, its leadership left scrambling as their project crumbled around them. For many homeowners, the ruling felt like the end of the world. Some packed up immediately, leaving behind gardens they'd planted and walls they'd painted. Others refused to leave, staging protests on their front lawns and accusing Marcus of cruelty. But for every angry voice, there were quieter ones, people who understood the deeper meaning of the case. These residents began working with Marcus to find compromises, agreeing to become tenants under fair rental terms while they figured out their next steps. It wasn't perfect, but it offered a lifeline to those struggling to rebuild their lives. Victor Langston, meanwhile, was extradited from the country where he had fled. Facing charges of fraud, forgery, and bribery, his empire collapsed under the weight of scandal. Investors sued him for losses, and news outlets exposed decades of unethical practices. In court, Langston tried to defend himself, claiming he was simply a businessman doing what businessmen do. But the judge showed no sympathy, sentencing him to years in prison and ordering him to pay massive fines. For Marcus, this brought a sense of closure. He thought he could take something that didn't belong to him. Marcus said at a press conference, "But my grandfather knew better." With the land finally restored, Marcus turned his attention to healing the fractured community. He organized meetings with former homeowners, listening to their concerns and sharing his own story. Slowly, relationships began to mend. Mark and Angela, the couple who had initially opposed Marcus, became close allies, helping him organize events to bring people together. Even critics softened when they saw how deeply Marcus cared, not just about the land, but about the people affected by the conflict. To honor Elijah's legacy, Marcus transformed part of the property into a heritage park. Walking trails wound through the fields, marked by plaques telling the story of Elijah Johnson and his fight for freedom and justice. A small museum showcased artifacts from the family's history, photographs, farming tools, and even a replica of Elijah's original deed. School groups visited regularly, learning about resilience, ingenuity, and the importance of protecting what matters most. Marcus also partnered with local organizations to address broader issues of land ownership and racial inequality. He spoke at conferences, wrote op-eds, and collaborated with activists working to preserve Black-owned properties across the country. His case inspired new legislation aimed at preventing similar injustices in the future. Lawmakers cited Elijah's deed as proof that creative solutions could withstand the test of time and hold powerful institutions accountable. Despite the progress, scars remained. Not everyone forgave Marcus, and some still viewed him as the man who destroyed their dreams. But Marcus accepted this reality. "I didn't ask for any of this," he told Lisa one evening. "But I had to do what was right, for Elijah, for our family, and for anyone else fighting to keep what's theirs." As the sun set over the newly restored land, Marcus stood on the porch of his rebuilt farmhouse, Looking out at the fields now dotted with wildflowers, children played near the heritage park, laughter echoing through the air. For the first time in years, Marcus felt at peace. The battle had been long and painful, but it had also reaffirmed his belief in justice and in the power of a promise kept. Elijah's wisdom had transcended generations, proving that sometimes the best way to win the future is to protect the past. Determined to reclaim what was rightfully his, Marcus decided it was time to fight back. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. This wasn't just about standing up to a greedy developer. It was about taking on a system that had long favored people like Victor Langston over families like the Johnsons. Marcus needed someone who understood the law inside and out. Someone smart, relentless, and willing to stand by him no matter how tough things got. That's when he hired attorney Rachel Myers. Rachel was known in town for her sharp mind and unshakable ethics. She had made a name for herself defending small landowners against big corporations, often working pro bono because she believed in justice more than money. When Marcus showed up at her office with the old deed and tears in his eyes, Rachel immediately sensed this case was different. As she flipped through the faded pages of Elijah's document, her eyebrows shot up. "This is incredible," she murmured. "I've never seen anything like it." The deed wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a legal masterpiece. Elijah's carefully crafted clauses outlined specific penalties for anyone who tried to misuse or claim the land without permission. If someone built structures on the property unlawfully, they would forfeit everything they constructed. Worse still for Langston, the deed also included hefty fines for violators, enough to bankrupt even the wealthiest developers. It was as if Elijah had foreseen exactly what would happen and left a trap ready to spring. Rachel wasted no time getting to work. She filed a lawsuit against the HOA, Victor Langston's company, and several local officials involved in rezoning the land. The case quickly gained attention, not just locally but across the state. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the century-old deed trap. Reporters flocked to Willow Creek Estates, interviewing residents, snapping photos of the new homes, and digging into the history of the Johnson family. For the first time, Marcus felt like people were listening. But uncovering Elijah's deed was only half the battle. Proving its validity in court would be another challenge altogether. Rachel spent countless hours poring over archives, gathering evidence, and consulting with historians to confirm every detail of the document. Meanwhile, Marcus did his part by reaching out to neighbors and community members who remembered the Johnson family's legacy. Slowly but surely, they began piecing together a compelling narrative, a story of resilience, ingenuity, and a promise kept across generations. As the legal proceedings intensified, tensions rose within Willow Creek Estates. Homeowners were shocked to learn they didn't actually own their properties. Some panicked, packing boxes and preparing to leave, while others refused to believe the claims. "This is ridiculous," one homeowner shouted during a heated town hall meeting. "We bought these houses fair and square. How can some dusty old paper change that?" But not everyone sided against Marcus. A handful of residents started looking deeper into the situation. They learned about Elijah's life, his struggles as a freed slave, and the lengths he went to protect his family's future. Moved by the story, they began organizing support for Marcus, hosting fundraisers to help cover his legal fees and speaking out against Langston's shady dealings. One woman, a retired teacher named Susan, stood up at a rally and said, "This isn't just Marcus's fight, it's ours too. We deserve to know the truth." For Marcus, the growing support was both heartwarming and overwhelming. He hadn't expected strangers to rally behind him, especially after so many had initially dismissed his claims. Yet here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder with him, united by a shared desire for justice. Even Lisa admitted she'd underestimated the power of storytelling. "People don't care about contracts or laws," she told Marcus one evening. "They care about stories. And yours is one worth fighting for." With Rachel's expertise, the community's backing, and Elijah's ingenious deed, Marcus finally felt like he had a fighting chance. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, doubts, and moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But deep down, Marcus knew one thing for certain. Elijah's plan was about to show the world that sometimes the best way to win the future is to honor the past. With the land finally restored and the legal battles behind him, Marcus began to focus on rebuilding, not just the soil that had been scarred by construction, but also the spirit of the community. He knew the scars of the conflict wouldn't fade overnight, but he was determined to create something positive from the wreckage. The Heritage Park became his first step toward healing. It wasn't just a tribute to Elijah. It was a bridge between the past and the present, a place where people could learn, reflect, and connect. Every Saturday morning, Marcus hosted guided tours of the park. Families, students, and curious visitors came to walk the trails and hear stories about Elijah's life. How he rose from slavery to become a landowner, how he outsmarted a system designed to oppress him, and how his clever deed protected his family for generations. At the end of each tour, Marcus would pause at a large oak tree planted in Elijah's honor. "This tree represents roots," he'd say. "No matter what storms come, strong roots keep you standing." His words resonated with many, especially those who had lost their homes, but found themselves inspired by the resilience of the Johnson family. The museum within the park grew into a local treasure. Old photographs of Elijah working the fields hung alongside letters he wrote to his children, filled with advice about perseverance and integrity. Visitors marveled at the replica of the deed, displayed under glass like a sacred artifact. Teachers brought their classes to study its clauses, sparking discussions about justice, fairness, and the importance of protecting one's rights. One teacher remarked, "It's not just history, it's a lesson we all need today." Marcus didn't stop there. He partnered with nearby universities to host workshops on land preservation and property law, drawing experts and activists from across the country. These events turned the Heritage Park into more than a memorial. It became a hub for education and advocacy. Lawyers praised Elijah's foresight, calling it a blueprint for safeguarding ancestral lands. Activists used the space to organize campaigns against modern-day schemes targeting minority landowners. Marcus often stood quietly at the back of these gatherings, humbled by the ripple effect of his grandfather's legacy. For the former Willow Creek residents who chose to stay as tenants, Marcus worked hard to make them feel welcome. He lowered rents for struggling families and allowed others to pay in installments. Over time, some even grew to see the land as part of their own story. Mark and Angela, once among his fiercest critics, became close friends, helping Marcus maintain the park and organize events. Their children played alongside Marcus's kids, creating bonds that transcended the old divisions. "We're all connected now," Angela said during one community picnic. "This land doesn't belong to just one person. It belongs to everyone willing to respect it." But not everything healed perfectly. Some former homeowners remained bitter, refusing to acknowledge Marcus or his efforts. They moved away, leaving behind empty houses that eventually crumbled back into the earth. Though Marcus regretted the pain they carried, he accepted that forgiveness couldn't be forced. Instead, he poured his energy into those who were open to reconciliation. As years passed, the land flourished again. Wildflowers bloomed where bulldozers once tore through, and birds returned to nest in the trees. On quiet evenings, Marcus would sit on his porch, watching fireflies dance over the fields. He thought about Elijah often, wondering if his great-grandfather ever imagined the impact of his plan. "You did good, Grandpa," Marcus whispered one night. "Better than anyone could have hoped." The Heritage Park became a symbol of hope far beyond Georgia. Tourists traveled from other states to visit, inspired by the story of a man who fought for freedom and won. Journalists revisited the case, writing follow-up pieces about the lessons learned. Historians included Elijah's deed in textbooks, celebrating it as an example of ingenuity and determination. Marcus received awards and recognition, though none meant as much to him as seeing families gather in the park, laughing and learning together. In the end, Marcus realized the battle wasn't just about reclaiming land, it was about reclaiming humanity. By honoring Elijah's promise, he had sparked conversations about justice, unity, and the enduring power of legacy. As he looked out over the thriving fields, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the victory, but for the chance to carry forward his family's story. And somewhere, he believed, Elijah was smiling too. The fallout from Judge Harris' ruling split Willow Creek Estates down the middle. On one side were the homeowners who felt betrayed, angry, and scared about their uncertain futures. On the other side were those who saw Marcus's fight as a chance to right historical wrongs and stand up for justice. The once unified neighborhood became a powder keg of emotions, resentment, guilt, hope, and defiance all swirling together. Some residents lashed out at Marcus, accusing him of greed and selfishness. "How can you do this to us?" One man shouted during a heated community meeting. "We worked hard for these homes. You're punishing innocent people because of something that happened decades ago." Others echoed similar sentiments, painting Marcus as the villain in their personal tragedies. These accusations stung, but Marcus tried to stay calm. He reminded himself that fear often made people lash out, and many of these families had lost everything they thought was safe. But not everyone turned against him. A growing number of homeowners began to see the bigger picture. They attended town hall meetings armed with questions, eager to learn more about Elijah Johnson and his extraordinary deed. One couple, Mark and Angela, admitted they hadn't known much about the land's history before moving in. "We just wanted a nice place to raise our kids," Angela said during an interview. "Now we realize how blind we were. This isn't just land. It's someone's legacy." These sympathetic voices started organizing support for Marcus. They set up fundraisers to help cover his remaining legal fees and created social media campaigns to educate others about the case. Some even volunteered to clean up parts of the property damaged by construction, planting trees and flowers as a gesture of goodwill. Slowly, a fragile bridge began to form between Marcus and the community. Still, tension simmered. Protesters gathered outside Marcus's home, holding signs that read "Fair compensation now," and "Our homes matter too." At night, Marcus would sit on his porch, watching the flickering lights of their candles and listening to their chants. It broke his heart to see so much anger directed at him, but he refused to back down. "This isn't about revenge," he told Lissa one evening. "It's about doing what's right, for my family, for Elijah, and even for them." To ease the transition, Marcus proposed a solution. Anyone willing to stay could become a tenant under fair rental terms, while they figured out next steps. For some, this offer came as a lifeline. Families with children enrolled in local schools or elderly couples without the means to relocate saw it as a way to keep their lives intact. Others rejected the idea outright, insisting they wouldn't pay rent for homes they believed they owned. Meanwhile, national attention on the case continued to grow. News outlets covered every twist and turn, turning Marcus into an unlikely symbol of resilience. Talk show hosts debated whether Elijah's deed was brilliant or cruel. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #JusticeForJohnson and #RightingWrongs. Historians praised Elijah's foresight, calling him a pioneer in protecting black land ownership. Activists used the story to highlight ongoing struggles faced by minority communities trying to hold onto ancestral properties. As weeks passed, the division within Willow Creek deepened. Friendships dissolved, arguments erupted at grocery stores, and online forums devolved into shouting matches. Yet, amid the chaos, small acts of kindness emerged. Neighbors brought food to Marcus's house after hearing hateful comments directed at him. Strangers sent letters of encouragement, thanking him for standing firm. Even critics softened slightly when they saw how much the land meant to him, not as a profit-making venture, but as a connection to his past. One day, Susan, the retired teacher who had spoken out earlier, organized a reconciliation picnic on the edge of the property. She invited both supporters and opponents of Marcus, hoping to foster dialogue. The event was tense at first, with awkward silences and guarded conversations. But as the afternoon wore on, walls began to come down. People shared stories about why they moved to Willow Creek, what losing their homes meant to them, and how they felt about the Johnson family's history. By sunset, there were tears, apologies, and tentative handshakes. Marcus watched it all unfold quietly, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust would take time, and healing the wounds inflicted by Langston's greed might never fully happen. But for the first time since the nightmare began, Marcus allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this divided community could find a way forward, together. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Marcus, Rachel Myers, and a handful of supporters walked in for the first hearing. On the other side of the room sat Victor Langston, his lawyers and representatives from the HOA. The atmosphere was electric. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a clash of histories, values, and principles. For Marcus, it was personal. For Langston, it was business. And for the homeowners caught in the middle, it was chaos. Rachel presented Elijah's deed as Exhibit A, explaining its clauses in detail to the judge. She argued that Langston's actions violated not only the law, but also the rights of the Johnson family, whose ownership had been clear for over a century. "This isn't just about property," Rachel said passionately. "It's about honoring the legacy of a man who fought against incredible odds to secure a future for his descendants." Elijah Johnson didn't just protect his land. He protected justice itself. Langston's team countered by questioning the validity of the deed. They claimed it was outdated and irrelevant, arguing that modern zoning laws superseded any old documents. But Rachel was prepared. She brought in historians, archivists, and even descendants of neighbors who could testify to the Johnsons' long-standing ownership. One elderly woman tearfully recounted how her grandfather used to trade goods with Elijah at local markets, confirming the family's deep roots in the community. Each piece of evidence strengthened Marcus's case, making Langston's arguments look weaker by comparison. Outside the courthouse, emotions ran high. Protesters gathered daily, holding signs that read "Justice for the Johnsons" and "Respect History." Some Willow Creek residents joined the protests, while others organized counter-rallies, insisting they were innocent victims of a technicality. Neighbors who had once shared backyard barbecues now avoided each other, their friendships fractured by conflicting loyalties. The once peaceful subdivision became a battleground, not just legally, but socially. Amid the turmoil, Victor Langston grew increasingly desperate. When reporters began investigating his past dealings, they uncovered a trail of shady transactions, forged documents, and bribes paid to local officials. His carefully constructed empire started crumbling under scrutiny. Facing mounting pressure, Langston fled the country, leaving behind a mess of unfinished projects and angry investors. Without their ringleader, the HOA scrambled to defend itself. But without Langston's resources, their efforts fell flat. Inside the courtroom, the tide turned decisively in Marcus's favor. Judge Harris, known for her no-nonsense approach, ruled that Elijah's deed was legally binding and enforceable, even after nearly 100 years. "The law may evolve," she declared, "but promises made must be honored. This land belongs to the Johnson family, and all structures built upon it are forfeited as per the terms of the deed." The ruling sent shockwaves through Willow Creek estates. Homeowners were devastated. Many had spent their life savings on these houses, believing they were secure investments. Now, everything they owned was gone, or so it seemed. Some packed up immediately, vowing never to return. Others refused to leave, demanding answers and solutions. A few even blamed Marcus, accusing him of ruining lives for the sake of revenge. But Marcus wasn't interested in vengeance. He understood the pain of losing something precious. After all, he'd felt that same agony when bulldozers tore through his land. Instead of gloating, he worked with Rachel to propose a compromise. He offered to let willing homeowners stay as tenants, paying rent directly to him until alternative arrangements could be made. It wasn't perfect, but it gave people time to regroup and recover. As news of the verdict spread, the nation took notice. Talk shows debated whether Elijah's deed was genius or unfair. Social media exploded with hashtags like #Elijah's Legacy and #LandRightsMatter. Historians praised Elijah's foresight, calling him a visionary ahead of his time. Meanwhile, activists saw the case as a rallying cry for marginalized communities fighting to preserve their heritage. For Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. Yes, he had reclaimed his family's land, but the scars of the conflict remained. The fields where he played as a child were now dotted with houses, and the close-knit community he once dreamed of building felt farther away than ever. Still, he held on to hope. Elijah's plan had worked, not just to protect the land, but to remind everyone of its true value. As Marcus stood outside the courthouse that evening, surrounded by supporters and journalists, he whispered softly to himself, "We did it, Grandpa. Your promise still stands."